We're gonna wait a couple more minutes. We're waiting for people to trickle in. We'll get started in just a few. Okay, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hopefully a couple more people jump on. We're missing a few. We are today not going to have a guest speaker like we typically do. We are just going to have a poverty discussion and then go over our housekeeping. But as many of you mentioned, the article is quite lengthy, so I expect there will be enough to talk about for at least quite a bit of our time today. It is going to work a little differently, though, because we don't have a guest speaker, and because I do want this to feel more like a conversation. I'm going to unmute you when you want to speak, so if you can raise your hand. You're still welcome to ask questions or put anything in the chat that you'd like, but if we could have some other voices present, actual voices present, I think that will be really helpful in making the environment feel more like a conversation than just me and Mary reading your comments. So if you haven't called in already, please do. Y'all are muted right now. You can call in on a phone or through your computer if you haven't before. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I did post questions in the Facebook group as was requested. So hopefully you guys had a little bit of time to think about some of your responses or think about maybe different things that you want to highlight that weren't necessarily things that I wanted to highlight. I also get like a little bit of anxiety around the plight of millennials. So there are some wonderful baby animal pictures kind of sprinkled throughout this webinar. So does anyone have anything that they want to bring up before we get started? Any topics that you found particularly interesting or things that you want to make sure that we have time to cover? I do want to make sure that this is more led by all of you guys, and our prompts are kind of just backups in case we need help generating some content. So I'm going to give y'all a couple minutes to write or raise your hand, and then I'll let you know if I call on you with your hand raised, and I'll unmute you. Did y'all get a chance to read the whole article? Yep. Good. Yes, 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 yay! Yes, yay! Okay, y'all just don't have anything to say about it. Okay, that's okay. So I'm glad you guys all got the chance to read it. Oh, who's online right now? Oh, Maggie, did you have something you wanted to add, or do I just need to mute you?
No, you should keep talking about that.
Okay. So Brianna says, an overall thought on the article, I thought it was really well written and I liked the animations throughout. It was nice to take a break and watch the little animations. I know some of you guys didn't have, I guess, the setup to see the animations, whether or not you had everything that was required on your computer. But they are really cool. So if you get a chance to go through that and not look at the plain text version of the article, I would suggest it too. It's kind of fun and interactive. Mia says she doesn't have any comments and you can't speak. No problem, Mia. You can continue to write questions if you have any, or comments. Trish says she's more of a dog person. Trish, they're not all cats, so I think this is the only cat. So if you like cats, I'm sorry, this is the only one that you get. Matt's pulling up some points. Morgan agrees with Brianna that it had a major impact and kept her drawn in. I'm glad that you shared it with some people, Morgan. I appreciate that. I think too it's important to make the disclaimer that we kind of share information and want to have a conversation about it, but nothing that we say is meant to be an authority or the end-all be-all. It's kind of just something that we found interesting. Emma, I'm going to unmute you, and then you can share whatever comments and questions that you have. You should be good to go whenever you're ready. Emma, can you hear us? No. Okay. You're unmuted on our end, Emma. I don't know if it's a mic problem or what. Uh-oh. I don't know. Can someone else do me a favor and volunteer to be unmuted for a second so I can check and see if this is on our end or...
Morgan.
Okay, Morgan, you're unmuted. Can you speak?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay,
Okay.
cool. Thanks, Morgan. Well, so it's not on our end, Emma. I'm not really sure what's going on, but you can either type what you want to, or we can, if you figure it out, let us know, and we'll come back so you can speak. Schwartzen says, I'm going to read Spencer's comment first because it came in first. Spencer says he liked the article, that the article highlighted the financial situation of working class and poor millennials rather than the stories of upper middle class and upper middle class millennials that he often sees on various media outlets. And Schwartzen says that I think the story about Scott put reality into perspective about how he had to focus on paying off his student loans, but at the same time he had to focus on future orientation as far as getting a city job instead of using his degree. Sometimes the degree can help, but the city job seemed the most lucrative at the time in regard to his situation of finances and personal well-being. I agree. Student loans especially just like hit home with my heart. So seeing that, I think, was really eye-opening and disheartening at the same time, if that is relatable. Stephanie says, the article highlights the complexity of tackling a social problem and how one institution has a domino effect on other social institutions. Housing is impacted by economy and development, and it later impacts how people can build their futures, like building a family or pursuing an education. We're going to talk a little bit more about that too. So I'll get all these comments out, and then we can do some deeper dives into these topics. Matt says he thought the article was really powerful. He was especially struck by the piece about housing, the ways in which homeowners' rights are always protected and tenants rarely have the opportunities to defend their interests on a city, state, or federal level, which leads to zoning laws that prevent construction on low and middle income apartment buildings. That's a really thorough answer. I have something on housing here, so I am glad that, like, that was such a detailed part of the article. I'm glad that your response was that thorough, and I would like to talk about that later and why I guess some of those things are the way that they are. I have a few ideas about those kind of things, but I have some context in housing and development, so my ideas about those are fleshed out a little bit from those experiences and not really from lived experience. So I'm also excited to hear about how all of this ties into your own experience, but also the experience of those that you're serving throughout your year. Schwartzen says, the article also talks about managing debt. It's a lot more hours to put into a job in order to get out of debt now than it was 20 years ago, like the boomers had. The number of hours from then to now is 306 hours compared to today's millennials, which is 4,459 hours of working minimum wage. I think in regard to that too, it's important, like so much has changed over the course of like the last 50 or 60 years. But the article also talks about how incremental some of those changes were. And so there is a really big there's a stark contrast between millennials and boomers, but it's not like we woke up one morning and had all of these hardships in place that boomers didn't have. Those changes were happening during their lives also. So So
yeah.
I think it's good to keep that perspective too, that all of these comparisons are from like 1970s or 1980s to 2018 or like 2010, wherever these studies were done. But history isn't like that stark of a change. There's not like this line drawn in the sand where, you know, you woke up in 1991 and then everything changed, or you woke up in 2010 and everything changed.
So I think part of that point is to keep it in, keep things in perspective as far as like history goes. And right?
I am talented, but not telepathic.
Right? I'll come back to that thought when it gets more organized.
Trish says, while taking out student loans for her education, she made sure to utilize every dime to the fullest and now has planned her degrees. So she's received 11 associates and now 2 bachelor's degrees with only taking out 50 grand. She didn't just take art classes that only lets you get a certain job. She worked in computer science and webmaster into it so that she could get her job and work doing what she loved. Okay, thanks for the update, Mia, on my mic issues. Can y'all hear me? Is this a me problem or is this a... Okay. So some people think it's fine. Some people are having some issues. I don't know whose end it's on. Just bear with me, and if you need me to repeat anything that anyone says, let me know, and I am more than happy to do that. And Trish says everything that she's learned is worth more than 50 grand. Sabrina says that she didn't like the negativity of the article. She said, sure, things are sucky, but if we blame all the problems on something, previous generations, economy, etc., then it becomes a lot easier to say that we're doomed instead of trying to place fault. We should be focused on finding solutions. I really appreciate that, Sabrina. I don't know if you guys have similar takes on that, but I went to this session at a conference the other weekend at MSU, and we did something on visionary organizing, which was really great. And if any of you are interested, I can send you more information. But it was all about how we constantly work to deconstruct the issues that we're working on, and like we want to fight poverty, right? That's what the AmeriCorps Vista mission is to eradicate poverty. But a lot of times in those fights, we don't talk about what we want to see in place or what values we want to uphold. And so being more intentional about that, I think there is some, like both work has to be done, right? Like you have to simultaneously work to get rid of things as you work to uphold things. But I would agree that a lot of the positive gets lost in those conversations. Trish says that she agrees with what Sabrina says, and then says if you're not bringing a solution, you're part of the problem. So that was the lesson I learned at Victoria's Secret, just for fun, because I used to come with all the problems, and then they were like, no one's ever going to listen to you unless you come with solutions too. So I think that's a real life lesson, and I think that is also applicable to wherever you work. Like if you're going to go and be like, oh, I have a problem with the way that we're doing this, maybe come with a solution too, so it doesn't just look like you're complaining. So now just applicable to this article. I'm going to move on and go to some of the prompts that we had. I do want to say that I really appreciate all of the comments that we're getting. But please, if you want to, if you're capable, like if you have the tech set up to do it, please also feel free to raise your hand and talk, because I don't like listening to my voice, and I don't especially like listening to my voice when it's recorded, and so everyone's going to be able to hear this webinar. So save them. Okay. So the first prompt that I sent everyone, okay, here's a dog trick. The quote says, "The touchstone experience of millennials, the thing that truly defines us, is not helicopter parenting or unpaid internships or Pokemon Go. It's uncertainty." And I'm wondering if, based on your experience and the experience of your service year so far, if that's something that you would agree with, and if that is, if that's really, like, is uncertainty a millennial issue? Is uncertainty a human issue? Or is uncertainty a contemporary issue? Because I don't want to confuse those things. And to say just because it's an issue now, that would make it contemporary. That doesn't mean that only millennials are experiencing it, and that, so yeah, okay, I'm going to open it up to any reflections you guys have in regard to that prompt. Stephanie has her hand up, so I'm going to unmute you, Stephanie, and you can share. You're unmuted now, so. So just kidding, Stephanie's mic's not working either. She's going to type her comment, and I will read it out when it is sent in. Robbie says, "I think uncertainty is an everyone issue, but it is now coming to a forefront, and so everyone can relate to it or openly speak on it. We aren't the first generation to be uncertain of our future or even uncertain about tomorrow, and we won't be the last. Uncertainty in life is very scary." Agreed. Does anybody else agree with that? Richard, can you unmute him? Rick, you're unmuted. Hello. You can talk.
Oh, here we go.
Rick, you're unmuted. You can just talk and everyone will hear you. Okay, just kidding. I muted you again. Mia says, "I would half agree. I think uncertainty is a human condition. Maybe she misheard, but oh gosh, so many messages. Okay. She doubts we're the first generation to experience it. There was Depression, World War I and World War II, and the Vietnam War. all of which bred uncertainty. Sabrina says, I don't think that we are the first generation to face uncertainty. Plenty of generations before us have faced wars, famines, and lack of opportunity that makes the future unstable. And Morgan mentions that she thinks uncertainty can also be a driving factor. It's not ideal to step into the dark unknown, but you have to take that first step regardless to reach goals. I would agree with all of that. I think that I do think that uncertainty is a human condition, or like part of the human experience. I think there was something with the word that it, like the touchstone experience, like that is what characterizes almost what it means to be a millennial. And I'm wondering if any of you guys are willing to either share about that uncertainty or certainty, if you want to kind of counter that in your own life or in the life of people you serve if you work with millennials. Rick agrees. Caitlin agrees and says many of us are in the developmental stage of emerging adulthood, which is defined by uncertainty and identity exploration. These feelings are normal for the time in life, but society has changed. And then Stephanie says, many of my friends are from lower income backgrounds, but many are pursuing higher ed to improve their economic outcomes. But many have faced extended education because of financial setbacks have pushed them back. They feel dejected that they are not on track to get their American dreams. The uncertainty plays a lot into a lot of personal anxiety. At my host site, I'm also seeing a lot of millennials that are a little older than me that are returning to education, that are scared about being back in education, but are most afraid about choosing the right program. So I served at Delta College, which is where Stephanie is at right now. So we kind of have a similar experience in terms of the base that we're working with, or our service experience. I saw a lot of that there too, and I've seen a lot of that with my friends. I chose a religious studies and history track, so there is like, oh, did you choose the right field? That kind of cliche. I think it's like the first paragraph, like, you picked the wrong degree. And that there, at a time, like in times before that, there weren't the same sort of sentiments, like a degree was a degree. So some of you guys serving in higher ed or K through 12, or even, you know, Rick at the Rock working with STEM programs might kind of understand the way that our society is so concerned with what the right educational path is to financial security. And I know a lot of people right now, so I mean, I'm not an older millennial, I'm 26, and a lot of my friends are around the same age who are having these crises because they haven't graduated yet, or they're just graduating now, and they feel like they're so far set back. And I think it does, Stephanie mentioned personal anxiety, I think it does cause a lot of mental health issues in the people that I know and care about, because they don't feel like they're meeting these social expectations of what it looks like to live life right and find economic security. So I would agree with that. I don't know if that's also uniquely millennial, but I am a millennial, so I don't have any other experience.
Exactly.
So, and maybe Mary can chime in a little bit with that too. Is that something that everyone was worried about when you were growing up too?
I would say to some extent, yeah. I hit the tail end of the baby boomers, so I'm not, because baby boomers ended in, like, some say 64, some say 65, so I'm right at the end. And I did college later in life. So yeah, my experience is a little bit different with that. But yeah, I think I experienced and some of our generation experienced the same thing that millennials are doing. Changing degrees, wondering if you made the right choice, if this is going to work out. My kids are millennials, actually. Probably the tail end of the millennials, I would guess. My daughter did her degree, and she's not even working in her degree. So, yeah.
Trish says that she is a boomer, and Rick says same here, Mary. So I think it's a really great opportunity to, Mary and I talked a little bit about this beforehand, about having these intergenerational conversations, because our society doesn't really give us the same spaces to do that, and so everything feels so siloed and so isolated, like these are millennial problems. And so I think it's really great to have some different voices here that can either expand that narrative and say, you know, like, this is a human problem, like we've all kind of felt this, and build community that way. But I also think it's an opportunity then, if something is uniquely millennial, to have voices that kind of affirm that, like, yeah, this is something that your generation is going through, that we didn't have to. And so either way, regardless of which way it goes, there's comfort in that validation or comfort in that community.
Exactly. And what my point was this morning, I hope you guys can hear me, my point was being a little more compassionate towards each generation, because when I first started reading that article, I was like, what, this is not my fault. But then you had to keep going and read on into it and read the things. There were so many things that built up to this millennial crisis, or this millennial, if you even want to use that terminology, that I was not even aware of. And so I always come at it from the perspective, okay, if you can have a little compassion, a little grace towards my generation, then I will understand. And maybe it's easier for me because I've had kids going through this, to understand their generation. That those things are real to them. We may not agree or see the same way. Or it's like Zaki was just saying, oh, it's your fault. You just picked the wrong career, or you just went into the wrong field. Well, no, not necessarily. Let's look at it as a whole context. You can't say it's all baby boomers' fault. You can't say it's all millennials' fault. Let's look at all these different things that added up to where we are at now. And like Trish said earlier, let's not just complain about a problem. Let's seek some solutions. Bring something to the table.
Spoiler alert, there are solutions proposed at the end, and we'll talk about those too.
Woohoo!
Okay, so I guess moving on then, there's a baby raccoon for you. That was the only cat and dog, so I don't think there's any more domestic animals. Sorry, guys. Employers didn't say, oops, we missed a generation. In 2008, we weren't hiring graduates. Let's hire all the people we passed over. And there was part of that that article that talked about the age of responsibility before the 1980s, where responsibility was seen as something each American owed to the people around them. It was a national project to keep the most vulnerable from falling below basic subsistence. And that at some point it switched to individualized, like a duty to earn the benefits that the country offered you. So I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts on kind of more of a moral ethics question that you guys get, because I have my theology background. What responsibility is there in a society? Like, do we have a moral responsibility to help people who are 18 at the wrong time? And like, how, if you think that we should, how do we better support these people that have fallen through the cracks? Rick mentioned that the media pits millennials versus baby boomers, and the info in the article was good, but the editorial was snarky. And then Patricia said each generation can make or break the next. I think that both of those are good, and I think it's a really great opportunity to look at media and all of the clickbaity get views, but not engage in conversation or dialogue that internet and journalism kind of lends itself to. So, any thoughts on social responsibility or the role of society? Is there anything that y'all are doing at your site that specifically helps to support people? Mia says, she has a hard time answering these questions as I'm so strongly anti-capitalist. It's very difficult to determine a moral responsibility to the people that were passed over because I see there's a social responsibility to help all people. Mia, I have some thoughts about that also that I will bring up, I think, later in this conversation about maybe different ways that even challenging the process through this article still holds up capitalism. I think that's fair to say. Emma says, this part of the article was really interesting to me. She feels like today everyone thinks it's someone else's responsibility to take care of each other, whether that's the government, charities, etc. But I think it's everyone's job to look out for each other, and we do have a moral responsibility. Matt and Emma both agree with Mia as well. I feel like it's really hard to be in America Vista and be like, oh, there's no sort of social responsibility because you give up a year of your life to be that social responsibility. So Trish says, most people that come out of school aren't prepared for the job force. They go through school and the motions, but aren't prepared to be a team player, to work in groups. The interpersonal communication is non-existent. Trish, do you think that that it's because students don't go, because they go through the motions but aren't engaged in school, or do you think that there needs to be like some sort of education reform to better teach those job skills and that interpersonal communication? Like recess used to be a big thing with interpersonal communication, being a team player, those sort of things, those creative outlets. Do you think that it's a student problem, or do you think it's a system problem within education? Or both? Trish says, most people go to school to get the degree, but not to critically think. Mia asked me to repeat the question. I was asking Trish. Trish said that she thought that people go through school and the motions, but aren't prepared to be a team player, to work in groups, and there's no interpersonal communication. And I wanted her to clarify whether or not she thought those skills were being taught and that students weren't engaged, or whether or not those were absent from the curriculum and that our schools were failing students in not providing those skills and resources. No problem. Mia says she recently sat in on this very interesting speaker, Cindy Brown from Hello West Michigan, about internships. And she had some really interesting points about why internships are and aren't great. Trish says that she doesn't feel like people are teaching it or that they're making it a priority when they teach it. When Mia expands on her internship comment, saying that internships need to be clarified, including what we expect from them and what they offer. students, and then why they need to offer those resources for professional development. I think that's really important. That's part of that intentionality piece that you guys might have heard me talk about before, where you can learn things but not know why, and they don't have the same importance, and they don't stick, and they aren't as meaningful because you don't do them with the intent to learn how to work better or learn how to think. Like if you're taught critical thinking, but you don't understand why critical thinking is important, then how engaged are you going to be and how much is actually going to stick? Rick says he really admires The Rock. That's his host site. Their material helps students learn social and real life skills. I think that's really important, Rick. And I think that you're doing great work there and that The Rock is doing great work. I like to look at all their stuff on Facebook. So if you guys are looking for cool ideas to do with students, especially around STEM, check out their Facebook too, because they have like the Foundry out there, and they're making seed balls right now. So they have like seeds in mud, and kids go out and throw them in the spring, and they grow trees. It's really cool. Matt says that these problems are structural. 2008 graduates were passed over because of the boom-bust cycle that is inherent to an economic system that focuses exclusively on growth, consumption, and concentration of capital among the gilded elite while ignoring social cost. I would agree with that also. Matt, I'll be interested to hear your solutions to that when we talk about solutions. Or if you guys ever want to, sometimes people, when we post articles, they'll want to talk about them, and we'll get emails in about what people thought were great or what people thought were terrible. So if there is anything that you guys want to follow up on that we might not have time to talk about today, because it's already almost 10:45, then we can talk about it more. I have lots of ideas. Emma says she sees this at the high school level too. There's so much focus on test results and following strict curriculum regulations as opposed to preparing students for experiences in higher ed and the real world. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, Emma. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna keep going through these slides because I do want to get through some of this content. Here's a baby hippo. He looks so slimy. The next quote says, some estimates show that 48% of workers with a bachelor's degree are employed in jobs for which they're overqualified. Sometimes I think it's like disheartening to be in college access and education work and to see that kind of statistic. And I think some people point to them and say, you know, like, why are we telling kids to get bachelor's degrees if they're just going to go and work someplace where you don't need a bachelor's degree to work? But, I mean, it says in an article, so 11.6 million jobs were added since 2010, but 11.5 million of those required a college degree. So I think that, obviously this is still really important, but it's more of a perspective thing in case we ever get disheartened, to remember how important it actually is to do the work that we're doing. Mia says, I think it's really fantastic how MCAN has defined college to include trade, tech, apprenticeships, and military. And Brianna says, I think it's really hard to hear the college advisor because she's so worried about all the students are going to work towards their higher education and won't be able to find a job in that field because of that. She still thinks it's really important. It's just hard to advise people. I think both of those are true, and especially so like The Rock works in STEM, and Trish is doing work with like art, but like she mentioned earlier, using that in a way that is employable and using technology with it, whether that's web design. whether that's web design, that there are ways that we can predict which fields need more people, and right now a lot of that is trade. So I think it's also really important what Mia said, that MCAN expands that definition to include all of that. And I would be really interested in hearing from whoever wrote the article what those statistics refer to. That was a question that I had, if that includes any sort of post-secondary education, or if that really just includes like a 4-year degree. Sabrina says what they don't say though is that all jobs are competitive, and having a degree makes you overqualified can make you a better candidate. Emma says it's getting way harder to get a job if they don't have any college. Those who don't have a degree are increasingly less likely to get a solid paying job. Rick says it's more realistic in today's job market. Caitlin says it seems like college degrees are becoming less valuable, but we have to remember that it's all about access. Everyone should be able to go to college if they choose. On the other hand, it's important to show students their options in trade schools and other certifications. Absolutely. Trish says people need to be told to find their passion and follow it and make it a great career, less turnover and more happy people in the workforce. And Emma says she agrees with Mia and says that she thinks it's really important to push this idea that college isn't only about a 4-year degree, but could also be a trade program. Some students hear the word college and immediately check out because they don't know the broader definition. Spencer says there are a couple of reasons why it's still important to push college access and success. One is a point Mia made about college access and success, including post-secondary credentials, not just traditional 4-year degrees. He says another reason is that even if a person is employed in a job that does not require a degree, the degree will likely make it easier for that person to receive promotion and pay raises. I think that's also true. And there's so much more mobility, right, in case like that job doesn't work out or you want to relocate, any of that.
Oh, most definitely. My son in Tennessee has a most awesome job, high school diploma, no college, but he's had a supervisory position. As a matter of fact, at some points, he's supervised 3 departments all at once, but there's a but. The kicker is he wants to move up. He has no college degree, and they said you need to go back to school for your mechanical engineering bachelor's degree, and then you can move up. And he's making some really darn good money, but he's still the mobility. He can't move laterally anymore. The only way is to go up. So there you go. College degree, no college degree.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting, too, to pair that or to partner that with the comments made on how certain industries are protected because they have legally required certification when that wasn't necessarily true.
I read that in that article.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like how being a hairstylist is obviously, like, needed, but you have to have a certification now, and some of those, or like a state license,
right?
And that's from anything from like hairstylist to like childcare to being a plumber or an electrician. That experience in and of itself and the ability to do the job protects those industries, but also is such a barrier to entrance for a lot of people because they still require thousands of dollars and time commitment that a lot of people can't make. Rick wants to know if they're offering to help your son pay for his school.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Can't say no.
Yep, 100%.
Can't say no. So yay. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard.
So if they want to pay for my school, I'll go back and get a mechanical engineering degree. So some specific impacts on millennials that they talk about. The increase in student loan debt by 300% since 1980, and 56% of people putting off a life event because of student debt.
Mm-hmm.
my brother is talking about rescinding his citizenship at some point because that's the only way you can get rid of student debt. But that also costs money too, so we'll see how that works for him. The lack of affordable housing, I know this was mentioned a little bit, and then the rise of contract and freelance work, which we talked a little bit about before. Mia, that's highly privileged, my brother. Oh, yeah. Yeah. My brother is, he's a special type of human, so we can talk about that off the webinar. I'm happy to. I've got some opinions on that too. But I think that's just the, there's no other way at this point for his family to make that money back, which is less of a testament to any sort of characteristics he has and more a point that I was trying to make about some of that fear and anxiety around student debt. But I definitely agree with that too. Brianna says the affordable housing for everyone at poverty level or even slightly above is awful. It's so difficult. She could go on for days about it, and she doesn't think that's just about millennials. That's for everyone at the poverty level. Yeah, I definitely think that is true. What they talk about in the article, for those of you that maybe didn't get this far in, was not only lack of affordable housing, but houses in particular, and how that, as Matt was saying, that industry is protected, and because of that, it has impacted the way that affordable housing has been made available and like where priorities are for cities and states in developing those. Something that we were talking about earlier was, earlier, not in this webinar, but before I started this webinar, is why we push housing so much, and why there are all those incentive programs and tax programs for houses, and how much that supports the national economy in terms of constructing houses, paying for furniture, supporting plumbers and electricians and all of these different industries as these big purchase items. And if we were ever to reshape and invest more in housing, how it kind of undermines potentially that industry, and then goes back to the other thing Matt was talking about, which was this need for constant economic growth and consumption. And then, sorry guys, we're almost done. We're gonna then move on. Thoughts on solutions. So some things that they talked about were portable benefits and attaching benefits to employment instead of like a specific traditional job. And then also subsidizing employment for employers, where like the government would pay part of your salary or all of your salary and then slowly taper that off and give more of that responsibility to the employer. Brianna says one point that she thought was really interesting was a part of the article talked about how one neighborhood didn't want to bring in another housing development for a larger amount of people because they didn't want to get rid of their parking garage. Like, those people were so worried about their parking garage, they didn't think about the people who needed housing. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So does anybody have any thoughts about, should our government subsidize our paycheck?
Or do so with like businesses that are at least trying to expand that maybe don't have the capacity to hire on more people? Stephanie asked if Michigan Works helps with subsidized employment. I have no idea I don't know if anyone who's on has any idea and could answer her question, but I'm not sure. I can look into that and then get back to you, though. And then I just highlighted those two because those were kind of the newest idea. But they also talk about universal basic income, which we had something on, and expanding job programs and minimum wage hikes, which I think are pretty kind of standard solutions that we've explored during the year. I'm going to read some comments for you guys. Caitlin says she thinks there should be programs for healthcare benefits for contracted workers. Yeah, so in the article they talk a little bit about construction workers in particular and how they have a bank time that some organizations use. So in between jobs, they can use that time and get benefits between those jobs. They also talk about actors and actresses going between scripts. So, yeah. So it's not like we don't have a framework for those that we can kind of borrow from. I didn't know about any of that, so I was really interested.
I didn't either.
Matt says, if you're interested in housing injustice, I would recommend the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond that came out a few weeks ago. It's an in-depth look at the brutal world of living as a poor tenant, especially when you're not white, and how an eviction can push you into grinding poverty. Matt, thank you. That one's on my list, and my book list is so long that when someone recommends a book that's already on my book list, it just gets pushed back to the top. So I appreciate that. Mia says, being anti-capitalist, that means that I'm highly in favor of a model that highly taxes its citizens, but then is able to actually provide universal health care, expand parental rights, and increase the social safety net, etc. That brings me to another point that the article talked about, that some of our programs are not ineffective, they're underfunded. And so we think about all these kind of new and novel ideas about how to improve our system, but maybe we don't need to start there. Maybe we need to start with the systems that we already have. Matt says the book came out in 2016 if you're looking for it. He just read it a few weeks ago. Chelsea says, I think attaching benefits to a job would be great. When I worked for Walmart, they would specifically keep you at part-time hours so they didn't have to give you benefits. And she worked with seasonal employees on Mackinac Island and didn't get any benefits because we were considered farm workers. If you're interested in stuff like that, Chelsea's got some really interesting stories about how farm workers are treated, or some insight into that classification of worker and how it differs legally. Okay. I'm going to end it there. If you guys have any other comments, feel free to carry this over on Facebook, or if you want to talk one-on-one about anything that we've talked about, or my brother's privilege in wanting to renounce his citizenship, feel free to email me that too. I'm happy to talk about that. We're going to just go over housekeeping, and I'll get you out of here, hopefully on time. So we'll see if I can do this in a minute. So March 12th and 13th, for those of you going to the MCAN conference, you will be here in Lansing. Please, if you were driving and parking at the Lansing Center, make sure that you get your parking receipt or we can't reimburse you. So I did already talk to everyone about whether or not they were carpooling. If you told me you were, or if you told me you weren't and you still end up parking there, please get your ticket so that we can reimburse you. And again, I'm going to be walking, so if anyone wants to walk from my apartment, you can park for free there, and it's like a mile walk. And I sent an email out about how you'd have to walk with my partner and I, but I forgot they're out of town, so it's just me. So if that was a barrier of you walking, hanging out with my significant other, you've got another chance. March 14th and 15th is mid-year training. Everyone will be there. It's mandatory. So count on coming into that. You guys should have gotten an email last week. If you didn't, please let me know, and we will forward you more information. For anyone who started in February, your Vista Year Initiative proposals are due March 19th, which is the Monday after that week. If you have any questions, please email us about those, or you can talk to us at mid-year. March 30th, monthly reports and timesheets are due, like always. And then mid-year evaluations should have already been sent to your Vista leader. If you haven't completed them with your supervisor, you need to, as soon as you can, and get it to us. And then
I have no idea.
Sabrina says, can we park across the street in the parking garage? Let me look into that and I'll get back to you guys. I know that I will look into it and I will look at the cost of it also. So expect an email from me on that. Lastly, April 3rd is National Service Recognition Day. Mia says Grand Rapids is not doing a National Service Recognition Day event, but Mayor Bliss is supposed to give a proclamation. Some places around the state are having events. I know Lansing is, and they'll have city officials come speak and recognize different members of AmeriCorps National Service Programs. We really encourage you guys to go if you have the opportunity. You do great work throughout the year. I think we do great work as a program, and it's really just a day for, I guess, people empowered to see our commitment to AmeriCorps and all the great work that AmeriCorps members are doing across the state, and kind of highlight some of that. If you need help finding some place, I only know of Lansing right now, but I will continue to look into that and see if there are any other events going on, and I'll send them out to you. If you know of any events that are going on, please send them to me so I can distribute them to other Vistas who might be in the area. That's all I got for housekeeping. If you guys have any questions or want to stay behind for a second, feel free. Otherwise, you guys are free to go. Have a good week. I'll see some of you guys on Monday.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you for your conversation.